forget that part. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming back. And you brought some friends with you. That's awesome. Those of you who were not here last time, I don't know if you've had a chance to review the recording or not, but I am Linda Waston, and I have more than 35 years of grant experience at this point, and really excited to be walking you all through the grant process. As I said last time, I take very much a communication perspective. So, and we're going to get even more into that today when we're talking about analyzing our audience, understanding what our audience, i.e. the grant reviewers, want, and then providing it to them. So that's really the approach that we're going to be taking for this. Those of you who are new, you want to introduce, I assume all of you know each other, correct? Okay, so those of you who were not here last week, you want to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what's your role at Family Reach, and what encouraged you to join the class.
I can jump in. I'm Fitzgerald Draper. You can call me Fitz for short. I'm the Senior Research Manager here at Family Reach. My interest in joining the course is that as we're building out our research efforts, we're going to be looking for opportunities for additional fundings, whether it's through grants and writing RFPs, and just would like to have your expertise on what's the best practice on moving forward would be.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I actually cut my teeth doing research grants for NIH. So I love research grants, lots of money out there. So happy to help. Who else wasn't here last week?
I can go. My name is Laura. I'm Senior Manager of Donor Advancement. I primarily work with major donors, but have had some experience with grant writing, and having a little bit more experience with grant writing now in the absence of somebody who's dedicated to that with foundation relations. So yeah, happy to be here.
Wonderful. A lot of what we talk about is also relevant for putting donor proposals together, even if they're for individuals. So hopefully you'll learn something for that part of your job too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Falami?
Yes. Oh, good first try.
Was I right?
Yes, you were. Hi, I'm Falami Jenkins. I'm the Senior Manager of Events and Donor Engagement. And so I'm interested in getting better with writing sponsorship proposals, trying to bring in dollars to make sure we have great, amazing fundraising events.
Okay, wonderful. And we're talking, we're focused on grants, but the same thing's true for sponsorships. They're just different audience that you're writing to. Great, glad to have you here. Everybody else was here last time? All right, then Taylor?
It's okay. I'm Taylor. I am the Senior Manager of Development Operations and Donor Engagement. So I do a lot of our revenue operations things, but my time here at Family Reach, I've done a lot of different parts of development. So I'm kind of here to just continue to expand my understanding of how to raise money for the organization.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Now is that everybody? Okay. This is intended to be informal. So while I'm pulling up my PowerPoint, which formalizes it, I know. So if you've got questions as we go along, please ask. You can jump right in and go, hey, Linda, I got a question, or use the hand raise function, or unmute. I try and watch to see who's unmuted to see who might have a question as well. Before we jump into this week's, and we're going to talk about the needs statement, which I think I previewed last time as what I consider to be the most important part of an application, and also the poorest done part of an application. So we're going to spend all day today really talking about how to create a good needs statement for your proposal. But before we do that, I want to make sure we clean up anything from last class. Any questions? There's been some good discussion on the discussion board. Keep that going. If you looked ahead, you know there's homework for next time too, which is writing a needs statement. So keep those going as well. But any questions or comments from what we did last time?
I have a quick question. So I guess maybe this is more of a question for my own team for development. Some of the resources that Linda gave us last time, do we have access to those in at Family Reach? Just thinking like in terms of finding a potential funder, it took me longer than I had thought because I didn't have a platform. So I was doing a lot of Googling. A lot of what would pop up on Google were from many, many years ago, RFPs. So it was just a little bit challenging. So didn't know, Devo, if we have access to those. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, Alex.
Was that a yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
For Foundation Directory, which would be
Yeah.
helpful.
I was going to say, given your size of your organization and the number of you interested in doing grants, I would recommend, if you didn't have it, getting that. The others are all free and you should have access to those anyway.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Sure. Anything else from last week? All right. Then let's dive into the new information talking about needs statement, what they are, why they're important, and how to write an effective one is really what we're going to spend today talking about. So your needs statement is what persuades your funder to act. When you're writing an application, grant application, sponsorship application, or application to a major donor, really there are two things you're trying to prove. You're trying to prove that there's a problem, and you're trying to prove that you're the one to solve it. And so the needs statement is where you demonstrate to the potential funder that a problem exists. And basically, for all of you, it's that there's cancer out there. There's a lot of cancer out there. And cancer is not a fun disease, right? And so it's demonstrating that to the funder in a very persuasive manner. Now, the way I said it, it's kind of like a duh. Of course, all those things are true. But you want to make sure when you're writing an application that you're not taking anything for granted. And so you are laying out the full case to the funder so that they're kind of getting to that duh point too. Because you all live and breathe this 24/7, and you know probably a whole lot more about the impact of cancer on an individual than most people do, but your grant reviewers don't necessarily. So you never want to assume that they know something when they may or may not. It also outlines the scope of the problem. So we all kind of know, yeah, I'm hoping I don't get a cancer diagnosis, but don't necessarily know all of the intricacies of it. And so that's what your needs statement is going to do, is to really outline all the different aspects of the problem that are important for your funder to know. And what's important for your funder to know depends upon what they're interested in. So you want to phrase your problem and talk about your problem in the terms that are of interest to your funder. So a cancer diagnosis is physically disabling, can be. It can be mentally and psychologically impactful in a negative way. Certainly can be financially impactful. It can cause other health issues down the road. It can cause unemployment. There can be transportation issues, and it impacts the family, and probably many more that you guys are going, you missed, these others. Which ones you talk about in your needs statement depends upon what the funder is interested in. So if I'm writing an application to an organization that's interested in caregiver support, I'm going to focus on not the impact of the cancer on the patient, but what's the impact of the cancer on those around them. And, there's great research out there about the stress of caregiving and, all the psychological and physical issues that go along with it. That's what I'm going to focus on to that funder. If I've got a funder who's interested in, and I know a number of you are doing health equity issues, I'm going to write not just about the impact of cancer, but what the impact of cancer is, how it's differentiated in different communities. And oftentimes those are different racial communities, but there are others as well. So I'm going to talk about, in general, here's what's happening in cancer, but I'm going to hone in on whichever community it is that I'm going to focus on. So it's important when you're writing your needs statement that you kind of have drafted in your mind, at least, what are all the steps that you're going to need? What's your outcome, so that we can set it up in a way that the funders are looking at this and going, "Oh, I know exactly what it is that they're doing." Which is also why we started last week by saying, okay, let's find your funders and what are they interested in and what's the piece of this puzzle and what of your why are they going to be focused on, because that's what you're going to phrase it in terms of. I also recommend that you parrot back the language that your funders use, right? If they talk about, they use the word health equity, use the word health equity. If they talk about income disparity, use the word income disparity, right? So that way, as they're reviewing it, they see themselves in your needs statement and in your project. Your goal, anytime you're writing a grant application, don't make your reviewers think. Do the thinking for them, put it in front of them. Because if you think about it from their perspective, they've worked all day, they've, done their personal chores that they need. They're sitting down, they might have 20 applications that they need to read and review, and they come from all different backgrounds and perspectives. Even the best intentioned are not going to work really hard to understand what it is you're talking about. So if you put it in their terms, it's very easy for them to see themselves in the problem that you're talking about. So that becomes really important, not just in the needs statement, but throughout your application. We're going to also talk about how your needs statement needs to have data that supports your claims using arguments. We're going to talk about how to tell stories with your needs statement. Your entire application should tell one really good story that starts with, here's a problem, here's how to solve the problem, here's why we can be the ones to solve it, here's what it's going to take to solve it, i.e. money, and here's why you're the right person to help us provide those funds. But within the needs statement, you also want to tell stories. And we'll talk about why you tell stories and how you tell stories in a minute. Research says that what persuades people is both logic and emotion. And men tend to be more persuaded by logic, i.e. data. Women tend to be more persuaded by stories. Not hard and fast. We can all point to people who don't follow those typical gender roles. But what that says is you don't know who's reviewing your application, so make sure you have both. You want to have both enough data and logic in there for the people who are looking for logic and enough emotion for the people who are looking for that emotion. When the research that looks specifically at persuading donors says actually it's the emotion that hooks them in, and it's the data or the logic that kind of confirms to them that this is truly a real problem. I always say, make them cry, then give them a reason why they're crying. And that will help you to persuade them that they need to act. Last thing we're gonna talk about is that your need statement needs to answer the question why. We'll also talk about the so what, because it also needs to answer the so what question. And that's really where we're gonna focus today on, is how to make good arguments, how to tell good stories, and then how to answer the why. Questions, comments before we dig in? All right. So arguments are the logical side of writing grants. And when you use our arguments, or you are using logic, what it does is it helps to improve the believability of what you're talking about. So you could just say, you know, a cancer diagnosis is just awful, and move on. But if somebody's not experienced it, they might not really understand what that means. Or maybe they had a cancer diagnosis that really wasn't that big a deal, right? And so they're going, it's not really a problem. But if you can delve deeper with more of the rationale and the reasoning, it makes it more believable. It also starts to substantiate your case. So it starts to give the rationale, the reason, it starts to set up your solution too, that helps the reader kind of understand the full story. When I talk about how your grant itself needs to tell a good coherent story, part of that is, you know, whatever need you identify here in this section, you need to make sure that you can solve it in the next one. So maybe transportation is one of the issues for people to have a good outcome, but if you aren't going to solve for it, you don't want to bring it up, because it'll still be an issue after your project is done. So that's part of the whole story that you want to make sure that you're telling for your reader. And we break it down for the purpose of the class, just for ease of talking about it, but your need statement, while we talk about it in isolation, does not exist in isolation, if that makes sense. The other thing that it does is it provides the logic that your reader may need to believe what you're talking about. And most importantly, as you're thinking through the arguments you're going to make in your application, you want to think about what are some of the things that your audience might disagree with or might not understand. And you want to put those forward to them in a way that answers their argument before they have a chance to make it. In persuasion theory, we call this inoculation theory. So it's like, I'm going to give you a little bit of the flu so you can fight off the rest of the flu. In this case, I'm going to think about what are some of the objections I've heard people say about this, or what are the things people have brought up, and I'm going to answer it. Because your grant application is a one-way communication. You don't have the opportunity to engage in dialogue with your reviewers. So this is how you're doing that. So for example, I've written some grant applications for some of our local Catholic schools. And the perception is, well, the Catholic schools, that's where all the rich kids are going. You don't need any grant funds, and especially you don't need any scholarship funds. Just ask the rich parents. They'll give you the money they need. Not true. And so what we would do in those applications is we would even be as bold as to say, you know, a lot of people think that, you know, the Catholic school system is where all the rich kids go, but that's not entirely true. 30% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. So we still have that need in our community and in our schools. Or it doesn't, you know, I used to work at St. Ambrose, which is a Catholic college in the community. And same kind of perception, right? Your tuition is so expensive. Why do you need any more money? And we would always point out that tuition doesn't pay the full cost of you going to school. Right? We need to augment that. So that's starting to inoculate your reader. against some of the things that they may not understand or may not agree with in the application. So that's one of the things that you're going to do when you're using an argument. So how do we use arguments? There are 3 parts to every argument. The first part is the claim. And the claim is what you want your audience to believe. It's what I'm trying to convince you of. So in my example, we're gonna build a community center in a low-income neighborhood. And so my claim is the children in this neighborhood need additional support. I should, by the way, give you a caveat that all the data that I use in these examples totally made up. Demonstration purposes only, don't take any of the data at face value. So if I'm going to claim that children in this neighborhood need additional support, the next thing I need is some data. And my data is what allows me to draw the conclusion that I'm drawing from my claim. So my data in this case would be that 54% of the children in this neighborhood come from single parent households who earn less than 150% of the poverty level. Because of that, the children in this neighborhood need additional support. What allows me to draw that conclusion is the warrant. The warrant is what connects your data to your claim. So in this case, my warrant is that children from single parent and poverty households need more support. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. If you remember from your logic classes in college, this is a syllogism. So it's what I see in a lot of writing and in a lot of need statements is that people will make the claim, but they don't support the claim. So it'll be, we're building a new community center in XYZ neighborhood because the kids need more support. We're going to build the community center and it's going to be awesome, blah, blah, blah. And you're going, why there? Why do they need more support? What's so special about that neighborhood? They forget the data. Okay. Let me give you another example. This one isn't need statement. This is more why my organization. So my claim is that organization X, mine, has the experience, expertise, and track record to provide the needed skills to these students. Now, a community center can do a lot of things. Kids who live in poverty have a lot of needs, right? And so we could be providing educational outcomes. We could be doing job training. We could be, doing safety kinds of work. We could be feeding the kids, etc. And so I'm claiming we have the expertise to build this community center. What's going to allow me to draw that claim is the data that says, since beginning the after-school program, ITVS scores of participants rose 10 points compared to losing 2 points for non-participants. So this data tells me that what I'm going to focus on in this application are the academic outcomes that are most important. And so if this is what I'm focusing on as an outcome, my need data is not just going to talk about their low income, but you know what? They're falling behind in reading and in math, and their dropout rate is higher and their kindergarten readiness is lower, whatever kinds of, again, needs my funder is interested in. Okay, make sense? So my warrant, this time, there are multiple warrants that allow me to draw that conclusion from that claim. First one being that ITBS scores measure achievement, debatable. Increases are due to the after-school program, debatable. Could be that the most, the better students are the ones coming. And past success equals future success. Again, debatable. And so when you're writing this in an application, you aren't going to write it like this. What you're going to do probably is your application is going to say, my organization has the experience, expertise, and track record to provide these skills to these students. Since beginning the after-school program, ITBS scores have risen by 10% or by 10 compared to losing 2 points for non-participants. You're not going to write the warrant, but the importance of the warrant is to recognize that's what's linking the two. So you can say, wait a minute, does that claim make sense with that data? And to say, okay, will my audience believe that because ITBS scores went up, that means we have the expertise? If you're writing to a general audience, probably. If you're writing to an audience that's full of education researchers and professionals, you might need to validate the ITBS score, right? And by looking at the warrant, that's what tells you whether or not you need more information there to help verify and validate what it is that you're saying. Okay? Does that make sense?
Can I ask
Linda,
a
I have-
question?
oh,
Oh, no, you go first, Alex.
I have a quick question. I think the two examples that you just shared is pretty much exactly where I usually get tripped up, and I see the first one you shared as the need statement as capturing the needs of the community, and then this one, my thought would be to put this in like the program overview or program summary. Can you talk about like the nuances there and how this represents a need statement?
This one does not represent a need statement.
Okay.
This one
Got it.
would go in the program summary. Good catch.
Okay.
Because and actually, as I put this together, I kept trying to come up with something that was different than the first one that used the data.
Got
So
it.
very good catch. First one, absolute need statement. Morgan?
I have a question on tailoring to your fund, like the funders' specific needs. And I'm curious, have you ever seen a situation that's gotten you into a little bit of trouble where, you know, that's where they're super focused? Maybe it's transportation, that's all that they want to be funding, and that's all that their money is going to be going to. It's going to be super restricted in terms of like thinking on our back end. How do you work on that with something like this, like keeping it specific and for the interest of the funder while also thinking in the back end it might be broader and the budget might span across several areas of a particular program?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, if this funder will only fund transportation,
Mm-hmm.
your budget is going to only include transportation. So yes, your whole program, maybe you're doing some kind of navigation program. And let's say that program is $100,000 program. And it includes financial support, it includes education, it includes some personal outreach, reminders, and transportation, okay? So we're gonna talk about in your needs statement, I like to think of it as an inverted pyramid. So your inverted pyramid for your needs statement is gonna be cancer sucks, right? It's expensive, it's challenging, it's, you know, it's confusing, it's very technical. And then, and for people who are lower income, which is who probably needs the transportation, that's even more daunting. And add to that transportation. Now, this is not part of your needs statement now. This is part of your project plan. Your project plan then would say, we've got this great program that provides for all the needs of this population. It does, you know, finance, blah, blah, you know, those other things. And we are one of the few that provides transportation. And so now I'm going to spend the majority of my project plan talking about my transportation. I'm just going to put it in the context of everything else. And then your budget, $100,000 program, 20,000 of that is transportation. Funder, fund this 20,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then funder number 2, who wants to provide financial support, the beginning of your application is the same. Your needs statement doesn't focus on transportation, it focuses on the cost. You know, 20% of all people with a cancer diagnosis end up going into bankruptcy, even those with insurance, because even without insurance, it costs, you know, whatever. And then the opening of your project plan is the same. The rest of it then doesn't focus on transportation. Here's how we're gonna get the money to the people who need it. $100,000 budget, 20,000 of it is financial support, funder fund that 20,000. Make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Now, on the back end, from a finance perspective, you need to make sure, well, you need to make sure on the front end when you're writing the application that yes, you will spend 20,000 on transportation. Because if you only spend 5, you can't use the other 15. And then on the back end at the organization level, you need to make sure that all of that is lining up and you can prove it.
Mhm.
Make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Other questions about the argument piece? Now, the reality is the arguments you're going to make are not this simple. You're going to use more complex arguments. You're going to have a claim that's going to have a piece of data. It's going to have a warrant. It's going to have more data, more warrant, more data, more warrant, right? Some of the examples that I've been using just off the cuff are more complex, right? Cancer's not good. Why? It hurts you financially, data. It hurts you emotionally, data. It hurts you physically, data, right? So this is more of what you're going to do. Again, we simplify it for the sake of being illustrative, illustrating it. Different types of data that you can use. Statistics are probably the most common thing that people think of when they think of data. And, you know, when you're using statistics, you want to be very careful. And again, this depends upon your audience. So Fitz, if you're writing a research grant, you are going to be much more specific and exact in your statistics than somebody who's going to be writing I think it's Falami, you said you're writing sponsorship applications, right? Very different kind of use of statistics. So always your audience comes first. But in general, when you're using statistics in a grant, if you're not doing one of these highly technical research kinds of grants, or, you know, a federal grant that's going to the National Cancer Institute, you can be a little bit more explanatory, I guess, with your statistics. So let's say it's, you know, 20% of everyone with a cancer diagnosis ends up going into bankruptcy. It's, you know, maybe the data comes out to be it's 18.5%. You don't need to be that exact. You can say it's 20%. You can say it's 1 in 5. The other thing I would do is make sure you relate your statistics to your audience. If it was 20% of people with a cancer diagnosis go into bankruptcy, if that's true, is that a lot? I don't know. Maybe last year it was 50 and we're doing really good. Maybe last year it was 5 and we're doing really bad. If you're one of the 20%, it's really bad. And so to just kind of explain what that statistic means, and you can do that very easily. Only 20% of people with a cancer diagnosis go into bankruptcy. An overwhelming 20% of people with a cancer diagnosis go into bankruptcy. Same sentence, one word changed, totally changed the meaning. The other thing I do is relate the statistics to your audience. So I know you're a national organization, but a lot of your projects were very localized. So, you know, you might say 20% of all cancer diagnoses result in a bankruptcy. Nationally, that means 2 million people are going into bankruptcy because of a medical condition. Or in Philadelphia, that equates to 50,000 people, you know, or however the math works. I should also tell you, I don't do math very well on the fly, so I may call that up too. But make it again so your audience doesn't have to think. draw them to the conclusion that you want them to draw, rather than having them draw their own, because they may or may not draw the conclusion that you want. Now, where can you find these statistics? My absolute favorite resource of all is the Census Bureau. They have a page called Fact Finder, and you can find all kinds of demographic information for the country, for a state, for a county, for a city, number of people, number with health insurance, what's their racial makeup, what's their ages, what's their gender, what's their poverty level, all that kind of stuff. That's always where I go first. The other place that I love to go are school report cards. Each state has to report on the demographics of their schools. And so that is, with census data, you can get down to the block level. So if you have a neighborhood that you want to know what's the demographics of, the census data will let you do that. It is not quick and easy. Some of you may disagree if that's what you like to do. I find it not very quick and easy. Their fun fact page lays it all out for you. What school district data can let you do is take it down at least to the neighborhood school level. So my assumption is that if 30% of the kids qualify for free and reduced lunch, they're coming from low income families. Right? It's not the kids who have one income level and the parents have a different. Same with demographics in terms of racial and ethnic makeup. If the 30% of the school is children of color, chances are the neighborhood they're drawing from is pretty close to that as well. So it's a way to extrapolate the data. Now, every state is different in how they report that data, but if you look up whatever the state is and report card, usually it can walk you through it. Probably less important for your purposes, but it also has like, what's their reading level, what's their, how many kids have an IEP, how many are English language learners, that you might find very useful. As well. So that's my second favorite source that I use. Andrea?
I was going to say, Linda, a third source we can add to the mix, and I sent it in the chat, but the impact team is dedicated to our own internal stats as well as external. So if any of you are ever working on a proposal and need a thought partner, someone from my team can definitely help. But Fitz has experience writing proposals and can really help craft that narrative to make the stat a little bit easier to understand. So just like submitting an impact request to Kate to get our internal data, you can also submit one, and Fitz can help you find and kind of comb through the literature, because I know it can be a little bit overwhelming to find the right stat.
Awesome. Great resource. Use it. That is awesome. I was just going to say, I'm sure you have lots of internal statistics as well that you can use. I also use Google a lot if it's something that I need, if I need to know what's the cancer incidence rate in Iowa. First of all, we keep that statistic and I can find it through the Department of Public Health. But usually for the kinds of grants I'm writing, if I see that the incidence rate is 1 in 100,000 and there's 200,000 people in the state, that's 2, right? So a lot of extrapolation goes on there with the statistics. Make sure that you are explaining what it is. Be truthful, but again, unless you're writing something highly technical, highly specific, you don't have to take it down to 3 decimal places. Just make it easy for your reader to understand. Okay. Other types of data, testimonials. We tend to use this a little bit more when on the outcome statement and the project plan, but you can also use this for in the needs statement. Let me tell you a little bit about this story and how the cancer diagnosis devastated this family. Financially, they couldn't get transportation, whatever that is that you're focused on. And we're talking about how to tell a story in a minute, and I'll show you a testimonial in there. Expert opinion, that is, if you're going to the literature and you want to pull some information from the literature to support your claim. And I've got an example of that coming up as well. And then what I like to call common sense. Sometimes you just can't find anything external out there to really explain and help support your claim, but you know it's true and you just need a bit of an explanation. So let me give you an example. I was writing a grant for an organization that provides a clothing pantry. So they give away free clothing to people in need. I was looking all over about how many people don't have enough clothes. So what if you don't have enough clothes? What's the harm, etc., and could not find anything. And then I kind of sat back and thought about it and kind of went, okay, so why is this important? There's two options here, right? It's not important, and that's why I can't find anything, or just nobody's articulated it. And I think we can all agree it's important that we have clothes, good fitting, weather appropriate clothes. But how can I explain that in a grant application? And actually, some of this came from some of the stories that the client was telling me about a family who came in the middle of winter. We are in Davenport, Iowa, cold, snowy, very cold sometimes. And they came in the middle of winter, and all the kids had were shorts and sandals and t-shirts. And that's what they were going to school in the middle of winter. And I went, that's my data. So I call that kind of common sense, right? Clothes are really important. Imagine trying to walk to school in the middle of a Davenport winter when all you have to wear are shorts and sandals and a t-shirt. It's not safe. You're going to get frostbite. You're going to get sick, etc. So that's kind of what I call that common sense approach to using the data. Again, don't leave it to your client or to your reader to draw that connection for them. Make sense? The question I often get in talking about data is referencing and how you need to reference the data that you're using. Again, the answer, you're going to be tired of hearing this, it depends on the funder, depends on their expectation, it depends on, frankly, their sophistication. Fitz writing research grants, you better footnote the heck out of everything that you're going to be writing. If you're writing more to a community grant, then oftentimes you can get away with not citing a full citation. A lot of the grants that we write will have 500 or 1,000 characters to explain the whole need. And I'm not going to waste 100 of those characters with a reference. Nor is the reviewer going to want to see that reference. It's just going to confuse them. So I might say something like Census Bureau data says, extrapolating from Census Bureau and National Cancer Statistic data. Sometimes if I don't have a lot of room, I'll just say research says. So you need to look at what is your funder looking for, what are they allowing, and what makes the most sense. If there's a section that is put your references here, you better have references. Okay, that good hint there. Some common errors that I see in arguments, very common. I see no data supporting the claim. I used to teach graduate level classes, and the papers would be claim. Cancer's bad, it hurts us financially, it hurts us emotionally, it hurts us physically. That's all claims, there's no data. Okay, so make sure you've got some data supporting whatever you're talking about. Data, but no claim. I don't see this very often, but sometimes it happens because people are like, oh, got to get the data in. Linda said, get the data in. So I got the data. But you need to draw the conclusion. The claim is the conclusion. So when I say like 20% of all people with cancer end up in bankruptcy, that's data. The so what is the claim. what do you want me to conclude from that? Is that good or is that bad? And so tell me, right? Cancer hurts us financially. 20% of the people end up in bankruptcy. You know, that's the claim and the data. So make sure you've got both. The warrant does not link the data to the claim. They don't make sense that they come together. If you want to see really good examples of warrant that doesn't link the data to the claim, pay attention to political speech, whether it's ads, whether it's speeches, and I don't care what side of the aisle it is. It'll be, you know, we're just gonna talk about whatever the issue is, and we're gonna say, you know, the sky is blue, therefore vote for me. And you're going, huh? How did you make that connection? The data doesn't link to the claim. Being in Iowa, we're already seeing political ads, so that's very top of mind as well. There's also some fallacies you want to avoid. An ad hominem is when you attack the person, not the argument. Politics. But that all, you know, and I don't know how you would use an ad hominem argument in what you would be doing, you know, fund us because the other organizations that do this work are stupid. You know, that would be an ad hominem, and you would never say that. A non sequitur when they follow, which is also the warrant not linking the data to the claim. So it would be something like, you know, again, the sky is blue, therefore, you know, vote for me. You know, that's a non sequitur. Post hoc ergo propter hoc means that just because something follows does not necessarily mean it caused. It's confusing causation with correlation. So, you know, I wore my red socks today and I got an A. My red socks are my lucky socks that are giving me an A on my test. Therefore, I need to always wear my red socks. That's post hoc fallacy. And then a hasty generalization is when you use too few examples and draw a conclusion. So on our previous example of the ITBS scores, if we used a testimonial that was, you know, look at Susie. Susie came to our after school program. She was barely reading. And at the end of the school year, she was reading 2 grades above grade level. That's great data. But if Susie's the only student who had that experience, everybody else dropped, that's a hasty generalization. And when we use stories and we use testimonials, we fall into that hasty generalization trap. And usually what I'll do in that instance, if I'm using that example and assuming everything is true, you know, I'd say Susie is like 90% of the kids in our program who are all now reading above grade level. So making it personal, but also answering that hasty generalization. So let me show you a couple examples of how we use arguments in grants. Again, totally made up. Any county has a growing elderly population with 20% of residents currently over the age of 65. Census data projects that we will reach 30% by 2025. That equates to 5,000 seniors in various stages of health and mobility. So you know where the data came from. My claim is this county has a growing elderly population. My data, it's going from 20 to 30% in the next, I guess that's 3 years now. And I got my data from census. And then I explain why, what's the so what. So in our community, assuming I'm writing to somewhere in any county, that's 5,000 seniors. And I could say that's a whopping 5,000 seniors. That's only 5,000 seniors if I wanted to put a little bit of English on that. Another example, this is an actual one that I'd use in a grant application. Cancer obviously affects people physically, but it can also take a significant emotional toll on patients and those close to them, both during and after treatment. Research conducted by City of Hope, a nonprofit research center, suggests that the stress associated with cancer can have negative physical, psychosocial, and emotional consequences, thwarting attempts by the body to heal. So this is one where my claim is cancer takes in a significant emotional toll on patients and people close to them. This is actually the project is art for people touched by cancer, patients and their loved ones. And then my data is this research by City of Hope. Oops, sorry. And so it, and often this is how I would write it. If I didn't have enough room, it would be research suggests. If I was writing to someone who wanted the reference, I honestly don't know that I could find it at this point. But then I would reference it and say where it came. Okay. Makes sense? Questions about using arguments before we move on to stories? All right. Moving on to stories and telling stories in our application. Why do we tell stories? First thing that stories do is they connect the known to the unknown. And so as a way of really sharing with your audience, what is the depth of what you're talking about, what's the emotion behind it. If it's something that people really haven't experienced, it's a way to really show them what it is you're talking about. The example I like to use here is hunger. So we might say, you know, hunger is a real problem in our community. And I'm going, yeah, here it's, you know, almost 1 o'clock. I am getting kind of hungry. Well, is that what they're talking about? No. You know, let me tell you a story about somebody who suffers from hunger. This is, you know, mom who comes home from work and has a thing of crackers and 3 swallows of milk in her fridge, and she's got to feed her family of 4 tonight. She doesn't get paid for 3 days, and she doesn't know how she's going to stretch that and how her kids are going to eat. That's hunger. That's kind of connecting what someone may know with what someone may not know. And so talking about some of the experiences that the people that you work with go through is starting to connect that for somebody who maybe hasn't had that experience before. You want to never assume that your audience knows what you know. You live and breathe this 24/7, they do not. And I think if there's anything you can take away, that would be one of your big takeaways. I was doing a fundraising feasibility study once in our community, and I was talking to one of our leading foundation folks. And I believe it was for a new early learning center, childcare center. And I remember talking to this person about, you know, the need for early learning, why it's important. There's a shortage in this community. It's expensive. And the response I got back was kind of like, really? I mean, there's a problem for childcare in our community? And I don't know about your communities. There's a huge problem in ours. It's expensive. There's not a lot of quality. There's not enough room, etc. And that really illustrated to me how somebody who spends their day supposedly understanding the issues of our community didn't really understand what I would put up there as one of the top 10, if not the top 5. So don't assume. And your stories help connect that known and that unknown in the minds of your reviewer. It also better engages and involves your reader in both the information and values that you are conveying. If you think about the grant review process, so if we're a grant review panel, each of you has 20 applications that you're going to read tonight. You might be able to find some time during your day to read some. Otherwise, you know, you're working all day, you go home, you make dinner, you take care of the family, you know, you take care of whatever else you need to do, and you're sitting down about 8 o'clock tonight and you're reviewing them, and okay, you got them reviewed, you did a good job. Now, next week, we come together and we're going to talk about them. And we're going to go, okay, you know that, you know, application A, what did you think about that? People are going, application A, right? They're digging through it to remember them. As opposed to them going, oh, that's the one that had the story about Jim and Jane. Remember that? And we're going to read Jim and Jane's story in a minute. it kind of sticks with your reader, right? And that's the impression you want to have on the people who are reviewing your grants. You want this sticking with them, and for all the good reasons. It's kind of like the same reason if any of you are readers and you kind of go, oh, I know it's bedtime, but I got to get one more chapter in. Oh, I know it's bedtime, I got to get one more chapter in. Or anymore, if you are a binge watcher, right? And you're going, oh, I can't stop at the end of this show, I got to watch one more, even though it's 4 a.m. Your grant application should do that too. And your stories are how you do that within your application. We'll talk in a minute about how you do that. It also triggers an emotional response, which is going to make your reader more empathetic and remember your application more. Maya Angelou once said, people won't remember what you told them, but they will remember how you made them feel. So make your audience feel, and they will more likely remember your application. And when they remember it, hopefully fondly, then they'll be able to talk about it more and more likely fund you when it gets to that point. And if none of these convince you, this one will. Functional MRI shows that when people listen to a story, oxytocin gets released in their brain. It makes them more trustworthy, more generous, more charitable, and more compassionate. That's how I want my reviewers to feel. I want them, after they read my application, to go, wow, not only is that a really bad problem, but oh my gosh, I know they only asked for 10,000, but I want to give them 15 because this is just so awesome, right? And that's a biochemical response that comes from telling a story. So tell stories, and hopefully you will make that connection with your reviewer. So how do you do that? Especially when many applications don't give you a whole lot of room. You know, you got 500 characters to tell about your problem and what your need is. How am I going to tell a story in there? First thing you want to do is you want to talk about people. People give to people, and they give to people in 2 different ways. They aren't giving to Family Reach. They're giving to the families that you reach. They're giving to the people on the other end. You are the conduit through which they are doing that. So don't stand in their way of seeing the people on the other end. And so talk about it, not in terms of Family Reach, but in terms of Susie and Joey and John and, you know, all those people on the other end who you're helping. And those people can be real, or they can be fictional or fictionalized, or they can be anonymized, whatever makes the most sense for you. I'm always leery. We don't want to take advantage of the people we serve. But some of them have really good stories. And so it's kind of trying to collect those stories. If you need to anonymize them, change the name, change the specifics of the circumstances so we don't know who they are. Or, you know, some of the stories that I've made up and talked about today, yes, they're made up, but yes, they're true, right? Because you probably have someone who fits that kind of prototype. And so, and I have an example coming up that I'll tell you about too, but so, you know, they don't have to be, this is the whole story of this person and I have to use their name. The more real it is and the more you can use their name, the better, because the more believable and the more they'll connect with it. But if you can't, that doesn't mean you can't tell a story. Okay? You want to continue your characters throughout the grant. So we're talking about the needs statement. We're gonna have a needs statement in a minute where we're talking about Jim and Jane. And we're gonna talk about, you know, Jim and Jane needing more food. At the end, when I talk about, and this project is going to provide meals to seniors, it's gonna be, you know, your support will feed 100 couples like Jim and Jane, right? So let's tie that story together. Let's keep those people at the forefront. And it takes some planning and some editing, but that's a really strong way to tell a good story throughout the application. Use vivid adjectives and adverbs. Too often when I read need statements and grant applications, they're really dull. It's like people think that I have to be highly technical when I'm writing an application. The other way that people give to people is there is a person reading this on the other end. Talk to that person. Make them feel. And we make people feel through our adjectives and our adverbs. So I don't like talking about food insecure people. I like to talk about kids who are sitting in class with their tummies rumbling. Much more vivid picture of what's going on, right? People who don't know where they're going to find their next meal. That's different than being hungry. And food insecure is such a buzzword, such a catchphrase that unless I'm writing to somebody for whom that is what they're expecting me to say, I'm not going to say that. So look at your adjectives, look at your adverbs. Same things like it's only 20%, it's an astonishing 20%. Totally changes the feel of your application with one word. So look for where you can do that. Use personal nouns. I love to use names if I can do that. I don't like words like youth. I don't like words like seniors. I talk about kids. Because how often do you go, my youth had a great baseball game last night? Heck no, it's my kids, right? Much more feeling, much more conversation. I'll talk about my neighbors. These are your neighbors and friends who are suffering because of cancer, right? Patience is kind of clinical. How can you talk? And, the one I was using before, we would talk about people impacted by cancer. So what kinds of nouns can you use that make it much more personal about what you're talking about? That it's not, again, the sterility of youth. Describe what's going on, don't just tell. You're not a reporter standing at the sideline, telling facts about what the situation is. Describe it to them. What's it like to sit through chemotherapy? People have chemotherapy to get rid of their cancer. Okay, if you've not sat in a chemotherapy room for hours on end, bored, scared, getting sicker by the minute, perhaps, you don't know what that situation is like. So if that's what your application is asking for, describe it. Let the person into the experience and let them feel what it is that you want them to feel. Use emotional verbs. Our last session is going to be on some writing tips, and I get to get on my soapbox about passive versus active voice. Passive voice uses the verb is, which is one of the weakest words in the human language because it's kind of a wishy-washy word. It doesn't really say anything. If I were queen for a day, I would ban the word. But it's much stronger to find other verbs that get rid of is. Susie is hungry, right? Susie has not had a hot meal in 3 days. Her tummy rumbling echoes throughout her ears. She's sure the teacher can hear it. Much more emotional, much more feeling, much more impactful. When we talk about passive voice, the other nice thing is active voice usually takes fewer characters. I can almost always cut down by changing the passive voice. I'm sorry, active voice from passive voice. Telling a story is also conversational. It's not real, highly technical. Stories are conversational. So if you're having trouble kind of going, okay, how do I tell this? How do I explain this need? Sit down and tell it to someone, even if it's your recorder, right? So that you can just kind of go, okay, here's what the problem is, and listen to how you say it, and then write it that way. Or if you're having trouble even pulling it out, find a partner and ask them to help you pull it out, right? I need to write this need statement about transportation. I'm having trouble doing it. Help me to phrase it. Ask me questions about why this is a problem. And through that process, you might be able to find the conversational way of saying it, okay? If I get stuck, usually I'll just write. Just kind of go, okay, here's what I want to say about this. And then I'll go back, put it into active voice, put some of that emotion in, go back and make sure it's all true, which is another important piece. But sometimes it's just that brain dump that will get that conversational tone going. And make sure that the order in which you're telling your story makes some sense too. Because I've read applications and it's kind of like they go here and then here and then here and then back to here. And I'm going, I don't understand. There are times when I'm writing an application, especially a big one, and I'll read through it and I go, okay, I'm lost. And if I wrote this and I'm lost, the reviewers, no way are they going to understand it. So I start to think about, okay, what's a logical progression of my story? Oftentimes it's chronologically, sometimes it's temporally, sometimes it's visually, as if we want to walk around a room, if that's what we're talking about. So think about what's the order in which you're telling things in your story as well. And again, not just the need statement needs to tell a story, your entire application needs to tell a good story. We have a problem, here's the solution. Here's why we're the ones to be the ones to implement that solution. Here's what we need to make it happen, i.e. your money, and here's what the outcome's going to be. And so that becomes a really good story as well. Let me give you an example. This is the one I promised about Jane and Jim. Jane and Jim exemplify the average Anytown senior. Living on Social Security and Jim's meager pension, they have little savings. With Jim's declining health and Jane's growing dementia, many weeks Jim doesn't have the energy to cook a healthy meal and Jane forgets to eat. Like 1 in 4 seniors nationwide, or 1,250 in Anytown, Jane and Jim fail to meet their minimum nutritional standards on a daily basis. Poor nutrition leads to poor health and inhibits the body's ability to fight infection or heal after injury. It's telling a story about the senior hunger that we started with before. Puts a face to it. Now, is this a true story? Yes and no. I wrote it using my parents in mind. My dad's health was declining. My mom had dementia. They weren't eating well. We actually did get them some assistance. Dad didn't have the energy to cook and mom would forget to eat. That part, is sort of true. And then I fictionalized it to have it make sense. Right? They had more money than this implies. And then obviously I made up the statistics at the bottom. The other part on this is it not only tells the story, it also tells the so what. We're going to talk about the why in a minute. But okay, so they don't eat. Okay, big deal. Seniors don't need as much food as everybody else does anyway. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because it's hurting their health, right? And the assumption with this particular need statement and that last comment is that this is a funder who's interested in improving the health of seniors. And this is a way to do it, okay? We're going to put them together and use both an argument and a story. And when we put them together, we get Anytown County has a growing elderly population, 20% of current residents over the age of 65. Census data projects will reach 30% by 2025. That equates to 5,000 seniors in various stages of health and mobility. Jane and Jim exemplify the average Anytown senior. Jim on Social Security and meager income, they have little savings. Right? So we put that together, that's a need statement. Okay? Has both the data and it has the story. Questions about telling stories and integrating stories in your need statement?
Just to clarify, Linda, is this what then would be our homework setup, something similar to slide 15?
Is this slide?
Yeah.
15?
To the
Yes.
argument and story slide, I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Make sense? How many of you want to
I
write
have
it?
a,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Fitz.
I have a question. So, say if there's like space limitations, like what would be best practice in paring this down while still keeping that personal touch?
Depends how much I have to pare down. Some of what I would do, first thing I would do is start trying to find some word economies. Jim doesn't have the energy to cook. Jim lacks the energy. Saves me a couple characters. Maybe take out light. 1 in 4 seniors nationwide, or 1,250 fail to meet minimum requirements. You can kind of start to take out some of the words. If I had to start really taking out a lot, I would probably start to take out some of the detail and some of the emotion, trying to be very careful. Living on Social Security and Jim's meager pension, they have little in savings. I could just say they have little in savings. Or with little in savings, Jim's declining health, growing dementia, or, and declining health. So, it's starting to play with some of the emotional pieces to help make sure you're staying with the meat of what you need to say. Does that answer it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. What I find usually first, sorry, I'll get right back to Morgan. It is, even once I've cut out all the extraneous words, there's usually even more that can come out, and not even the emotional words like I was talking about. Doesn't have the energy to cook. You can say that a whole lot more economically, and that becomes one of the first things that I do. Morgan?
I have a really quick question. Do you ever put somewhere like a disclaimer that this, if it might not be an actual story, like this is an example of a patient or of an individual that we've supported? I ask that just because I feel like I've seen examples of like stories like this kind of like made up in proposal, and it feels so weird to me, especially if I am joining a meeting and have to speak to the program. So just curious if you've ever like put that in there, if you're kind of piecing together stories to make a story.
I don't usually say disclaimer, this is not a true story, because I think that hurts the impact of it. In this one, I think it does that because they exemplify the average senior. I think that's a way of kind of saying that, first of all, it gets rid of the hasty generalization, but it also was my attempt to say these aren't necessarily real people. Sometimes a word like anecdotally, we know people like Jane and Jim, as a way of saying that this is, are they real? Yes. Are they real? No. If you get the gist.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious, because I've seen stories written before where I was like, I don't even know if that happened, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. So just kind of want to understand like where you fall in that, like, and how you would suggest like positioning that, I guess.
Always do what's comfortable for you. I did one of these classes one time and there were some journalism majors in that class. Might have actually been the one that Eukarya was at. And they were like, no, you never make up stories. And I'm like, I'm not reporting the news, right? Yeah, if I'm reporting the news, I don't make up what happens. I tell you the stories of the people. But this is different. It's a different kind of writing and a different kind of audience. And, you know, if you are a journalist and you're like, nope, has to be 100% true, and that's all you want to do, then do that.
Okay.
Which I don't think is what you're saying.
No.
But you know, but that's kind of the extreme on the other side in my mind. If you're comfortable with it, use it. If it's kind of like in some of the stories where you go, no way is that true, right? There's no way that can be true. Because often they're way too fanciful. I would assume you believe this story because it's not true, but it's true if you get the gist.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
My favorite answer is it depends. So that was
Okay.
a really depends answer.
Really
And
helpful.
in reality, it depends on your audience too. What will your audience buy? And if you are, you know, if you're in a meeting and you have to talk about it or defend it, that actually gives you another opportunity, just like I did here, right? To kind of go, you know, this is a story. It's kind of true, but not exactly, if you feel comfortable saying that.
Totally. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions on using stories? Very powerful. Very powerful. All right, last piece, focus on your why. We talked a little bit about this last time as we were talking about identifying funders and how funders, they aren't going to fund stuff, they're going to fund change, and your change is your why. So not only are you focusing on your why as you're doing your research, but make sure within your application, you are also focusing on your why. So why are you doing what you're doing? Why is this important? Some of this is also the so what. So what? People get cancer. Why is that a big deal, right? People get sad. Why is that a big deal? Make sure you take it to the so what level. I was teaching this class one time locally, and there was an intern from United Way who was taking the class. And same structure, they were writing their need statement. She goes, I want to write a grant to buy diapers for our Born Learning program, which is for kids birth to 5, teaching the parents how to be their first teacher. And what they would do is when you came to a class, they would hand a pack of diapers to the parent for free. That was an incentive to come. And I'm like, cool. Diapers are expensive, low income people. I remember those days buying diapers, that they're one of those things you hate to spend money on. But it's a necessity. I'm like, but so what? So they can make their diapers, they can just stretch their diapers, right? Use them a little bit longer. Why are clean diapers so important? And so she went back and she did research. Wow, clean diapers are important. The diseases that people can get, they equated dirty diapers to lower kindergarten readiness because you miss school if you get infected, diaper rash, etc. Parents miss work. It's got an economic impact on the community. That was the so what, right? So take it to that so what level. They want to fund a change. They don't want to fund your stuff, okay? Your arguments are going to stem from the change that you seek. So you're going to talk about what you want to do based upon how do you want to improve the lives of the people that you serve. And if you always put the people that you serve in front of you, and you always talk about it from their perspective, that will always help you write a better need statement. Your what stems from how you will achieve your why. We're going to talk about the what next time we meet, because that's your project plan. But your project plan is you know, why you're doing your project plan is really what you're doing in your need statement. Some common errors that I see in need statements, because like I said, I think it's the most important part of an application. I also think it's the most poorly written, because people don't want to spend the time thinking about the what, or I'm sorry, about the why and the need. And for most people, it's a duh. It's like, yeah, cancer's bad. You guys live it and breathe it every day. You know, it doesn't make sense to articulate it. First error I see most often, this is not about you, this is about them. I should not see the words family reach in any of your need statements. It's about the people you serve. Too often what I see is cancer really is awful, it's expensive. Family Reach does really great things to help people who are touched by cancer. That's your project plan. We will get there, I promise, but it is not in your needs statement. The exception to that is if you are writing a grant that is something that is capacity building for your organization. And I don't recall if any of you are doing that. So for example, if you need a grant because you need a new server for your organization, or, you know, you need to replace the laptops for the people who are going out and, you know, your community health workers, or, though actually I'd still talk about them. If you're doing strategic planning and you need a grant to do that. But I would still start that by talking about the need, because why would I want to buy you computers if you're not doing anything of value? Right? Cancer's going away. We're curing cancer. It's not a big deal anymore, right? So make sure you still establish the need. And in that case, it would be, you know, cancer's bad. And here's all the reasons. Family Reach helps people with cancer, but we can only do that if we deploy all these people in the work, you know, out in the field. They don't have laptops. That's hurting what we can do, right? So unless you are doing something like that, you should not talk about your organization. Which also means that your needs statement can be used multiple times for multiple projects, right? Once you write a need statement for the need for transportation in Philadelphia, you don't need to write it again. You can just use what you had. Too often the need statement focuses on the what, not the why. Talk about your why, not just what the problem is. Why is it a problem? What's the so what? They either have too much story or too much data. You want to have a balance of both. Remember, you're trying to get the logical and the emotional reader. So focus on both of those. Has data that doesn't support the claims. Going back to the first one. Is just poorly written. And I have some writing tips, like I said in our last class. And it just isn't clear to the reader. When you read your needs statement, when you get to the end of it, you should go, oh my God, somebody has to fix this. I hope someone will step forward to fix this. If you don't get the, oh my God reaction, you need to go back and punch it up a little bit. Okay. So, and it should also be, okay, I understand what's going on here. And one of the challenges with an organization like yours, where you are very multifaceted. You do lots of different things. You're working with a problem that has lots of different facets and lots of tentacles to it. And so you need to make sure that while you're casting that wide net, you're bringing the story down to the specific that you want them to read or want them to focus on. So write as an inverted triangle. When I was at Ambrose, I would do that all the time. It's like, here's what we are as an organization, founded in 1885 as a Catholic institution. Today we have 3 colleges, business, arts and sciences, and health sciences. In our health sciences program, we've got, you know, nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Our nursing program launched in 1990. Today it has 1,500 students and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So you know that you're going to read about nursing, but it's put in the context of the other. Kind of like my answer to Morgan's question earlier about transportation. I know you do all these things, but I know the rest of the application is going to tell me about transportation. Okay. Brings up, whoop, to your assignment, your homework, write a need statement. Your need statement should have arguments. It should tell a good story. Should focus on your why. Should talk about your community, not your organization. Should focus on the problem, not the solution. Solution is next. We always want to jump to solution. Tell me about your problem. And as a national organization, I also know some of you were focused your programs in different communities, right? And think too about your funder. So it might be that I want to pilot this program in, you know, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Hawaii. But if your funder is only interested in Philadelphia, only write about Philadelphia. Maybe mention you've got the others, but here's the problem in this community. Or here's the problem in these 3 geographic locations because you're a national funder and you want to fund it. And here's why you pick those. Okay. Questions, comments? All right. Keep posting these on the homework page on the discussion. There's one for week 2. Keep answering and reviewing each other's. Great way to learn. You know, one of the things we're going to talk about in week 5 when we talk about writing, you want to share your work. Grant writing should be a shared activity. So reviewing each other's, getting feedback, giving feedback, great way to learn. And you all have the advantage, since you're in the same organization, you can kind of go, oh, I like the way Morgan talks about this. And oh, I like the way Alex talks about this. And yeah, I didn't like that. I don't like that. And so, you know, you can kind of borrow from each other, but also give your impressions to each other. Be nice, but don't just say, wow, that's awesome, when you're going, holy cow, I have no idea what that means. Say that, because we all bring different perspectives and your reviewers are going to bring an even different perspective. One of the things you have to do if you're going to be good at grant writing is leave your ego at the door. You have one goal and that's the check, right? And so whether or not they're your beautiful words or someone else's beautiful words, you're helping to put it together so that you can get the check. So use that opportunity to share with each other. And read each other's. It's a really good tool and a good way to do that. Last time before I let you guys go, I mentioned to you that I was getting notifications when things were posted. Are you guys getting notifications when things are posted? No. Okay.
Are we supposed to get an email? And I just saw like the little bell in the top corner with some notifications, but I didn't get any emails. So unless, yeah.
You know, I do, and I don't know why I do and you don't. One thing that, and I will look into it again, try tagging each other and see if that, and I think I tagged some of you in the ones that I answered after the last class. Did you get an email telling you that there was something there?
When you commented on mine, Linda, that's when I got an email. But when everyone else just put their posts in there, I never got notification on that. But when you tagged me and commented specifically on mine, I saw an email come through.
That's
Okay.
interesting, Morgan, because I didn't get it when Linda responded to mine.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I got an email. I remember thinking like, oh, maybe it's fixed. And I was like, oh, it's just this one piece of the pie. So
I can also, I was doing some exploring and in the activities tab for community, like under my like mentions, I can see a lot of random people that I don't feel like I should be able to see, like introductions and comments and stuff. So I just want to mention that.
People who aren't part of this group?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There shouldn't be, because there shouldn't be anybody other than you guys who even have access to this. Okay. The other thing that. What was the other trick I had? Was don't answer my post, start a new one. In the discussion, there should be a way rather than responding. I think that's what it was. Try that and try tagging. And I will, Alexis, who's the one who set this up, is no longer with us. So I will see if I can do some more digging, have someone else do some more digging to figure it out. But, and you can always email me. All right. Well, thank you all. Good to meet you, new folks. And I will see you on the discussion board and see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, Linda. Thank you.
Nice, thanks for
Yeah.
your information.
Thank you. Bye.